I want you, before I ask you this question, to think in your mind low. Guess low. Phil, when he asks me this question, guess, if anything, too low.
Okay.
So that when I do the ultimate reveal, you go, oh, I was so wrong.
Go on then.
How much of the world, how in percentage, whatever you want to do it, is overweight or obese?
Oh, I would say 1%, less than 1%.
Less than 1%. That's what I would have thought.
But
however, it's a third.
A third
of the world.
And that's including countries with a lot of poverty and famine and stuff like that.
A third of the world. There's 7 billion people in the world, and they reason around...
What's a third of 7 billion?
2 and a bit.
Billion.
2 and a third.
Billion. Obese?
Billion people. Overweight or obese.
Overweight or obese. Oh, okay.
2 and a third.
That's believable, though. I can believe that.
It's a lot, though.
Because, I mean, at this point, it's sort of average weight. Like in England, for example, you imagine the average person... Imagine the average man in England. He's a little bit overweight. He's not thin. Like, you imagine, like, a skinny person is normal, fine, but that's not the average person. You know?
But if you think, then, of all the nations in the world, all those billion, there's 1 billion people in China.
Yeah.
You don't see a huge amount of obese Chinese people. Their diet is traditionally and culturally very, very good for you.
Yeah.
The food they use is cooked in a manner like traditional Chinese food. Not the shit you get from the Chinese here. It's cooked in a way that keeps the nutrients in the food and makes the most of the vegetables and meats that they use.
Yeah.
Like the whole concept of stir frying is actually very, very good for you.
Why? How come?
Because when we in England like boil or steam or roast, you're overcooking a food.
Yeah.
Whereas the whole point of a stir fry is basically to hit it very, very quickly with a lot of heat.
Oh, so you're not getting rid of the...
No, you're not basically burning away that. So you're basically you're hitting it with a lot of heat very quickly to warm it up, to make it edible to a certain extent. And you're coating it in your sauce or whatever marinade type thing you're using. And you serve it and you eat it like there and then. Like it's good. There's very little processed food in traditional like Chinese cookery. Yeah. It's all very... You have your spice or your sauce, which will be homemade. You have your meats, and then you have vegetables on top. And it's very, very good for you. And your rices, noodles, etc. So that's 1 billion people. I would say their obesity rate is much, much lower than ours.
Much lower, yeah.
If you look at somewhere like the continent of Africa, you take out maybe South Africa, you take out the top of North Africa. Yeah. It's very famine heavy.
Yeah, a lot of slimmers.
Well, there's poverty. It's probably one of the most
poverty-stricken places.
Yeah, continents.
Yeah.
Asia, less so. Rurally, yeah. If you look at India, that's where the gulf between rich and poor at the moment is the biggest in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Like there's insanely poor people and insanely rich people.
Insanely rich people. Have you ever seen the most expensive building in the world?
No, is that in India?
Yeah, it's like a huge tower block that's owned by like a billionaire. And if you look at it from the base, it's surrounded by slums. Yeah, yeah. And it is that whole gulf between rich and poor, and it is really at its heart disgusting. It's just disgusting. Like I don't understand it at all. Glad to see I'm keeping your interest.
That's alright. So it's 3 a.m. I'm just yawning.
That's fine.
But I mean, I imagine the figure of overweight people and obese people is massively brought up by countries like America, England, Canada, Australia, the
developed world.
Yeah, English-speaking countries mostly.
But
I don't know why it's English is a curse. It makes you fat. Don't learn English or you'll put on a lot of weight.
But we're saying this in English, so you can't.
I mean, you don't already know.
You can't listen to our advice. Yeah. But no country on earth has reduced obesity rates in more than 30 years.
No country's reduced obesity rates?
In 30 years.
So they're either steady or climbing?
Yeah.
Everywhere.
For 30 years. But obviously some countries will be very, very small. But America, for instance...
Luxembourg. Yeah.
America will have a reasonably high percentage of obese people. I don't know the figures, but it'll be, and there's
quite a few.
And it's not reducing.
Yeah.
It's either remaining or increasing.
I always think as well, when you, like let's say you go to a country and you think you're getting a good read on the average person in terms of weight, you're really not. Because a lot of the really obese people just don't go out.
Just sit at home.
Yeah. So you go to the street, you're not seeing a huge amount of those people. You're not seeing the proper actual fatties.
Also, the prevalence of overweight and obese children worldwide has increased 50% since 1980.
Really?
50%.
50%?
In just over 30 years.
Jesus.
But, like, what causes that, I suppose, is the question. Like,
I think a lot of it is marketing and culture. It's culture. You know, we live in a culture where McDonald's is like one of those phrases that everyone knows and everyone uses, and it's like people just talk about these things regularly, and it's if you don't have that experience, you're missing out on a big part of this culture.
That's the argument as well. Not against education, but on the other side of education, we live in a society now where we're talking about, we'll educate the kids, you 5 a days, you this and you that.
Yeah.
And I've gone through it. You'll have food lessons at school, you'll have nutrition and fitness, not fitness, but healthy living lessons throughout school life. But the money and influence that marketing teams of fast foods, biscuit, chocolate, those kind of confectionery companies have, will always outweigh that.
Yeah.
And also, on a more social level, school at that age, you don't rebel against everything you hear, but everything you hear at school, everything they tell you at school, comes under that school banner. And so for a lot of people, you're like, oh, well, I hate school, I don't like school. Yeah. And, well, you listen to what they're saying, you go, yeah, well, I probably should eat a banana every now and again. It doesn't impact you in the same way as McDonald's sponsoring this, sponsoring that, having adverts in your face. Yeah. Everyone being like, oh, well, I'm going to have a chicken McNugget meal, I'm going to have this and that. And like you were saying, that is a huge part of being English, being in this sort of culture, that Western world of fast food. And
like if you don't have that, then
you're almost
feel
seen
like
as the weird one, the outsider.
So to a certain extent, in order to fit in, you have to have bad eating habits, really.
I also think we live in a world where this is almost a class issue.
Yeah.
Whereas your upper classes, your people with money, well, of course you're going to get the people that still actively choose to eat badly.
Yeah.
They're in a position where they can afford to eat well.
Yeah. And
often have the time to do so. Whereas if you're living below the poverty line, you have to make every like dollar, pound, pence, cent count.
Yeah.
And are you going to choose a chicken mayo for £1?
Yeah, or quinoa.
Or are you going to try and cook? And the difference is, you get a lot of people who argue, well, you can eat well for the same amount as eating badly. And yes, you can. I can go to McDonald's and spend a £5 on a meal, drink, chips, burger, whatever. I could go to Asda, Tesco, Walmart, whatever, buy a punnet of grapes and this, but then you have to go home, you have to prepare it, you have to put time in. Yeah. And when you're living in a period of poverty, and you have to work, and
especially with like families to feed.
Yeah,
and stuff like that. If
you have to work all day, you've got to pick up kids, you've got to look after kids. To then take an hour, however long out of your day to prepare meals, is a huge time burden.
It really is.
And people, I don't think, talk about that enough.
Yeah.
Well, the money, you can always buy well, and yes, quinoa and good healthy cuts of meat, etc., are expensive and will always be more expensive. You can eat well, you can get eggs and tuna and rice and this and that for reasonably cheap. But the preparation and the time you have to prepare that food is always going to be a big deal.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge deal breaker.
It's the same with exercise as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Exercise is basically a hobby.
Yeah, these are all things that are easier said than done, but if you don't have the time, it's very difficult to... I mean, eating right and exercise, they're actually big time commitments that you'll have to sacrifice things in order to be able to even do them to begin with, you know. Because most people, especially most people well into their 20s or 30s or 40s or whatever, have their days filled. So there are things that if you're going to add extra things to do in the day, you're going to have to get rid of some things. So you're going to have to make sacrifices. And a lot of people aren't in a position where they're ready to make sacrifices because they're stressed out in their job, or, you know, they have to try to keep their family together, whatever it is.
I think it's a lot easier to be healthy if you're a single working man, woman, etc.
Yeah.
Because the time you have is your time.
Mm-hmm.
It's 100% your time. When you have to get up at 7 in the morning, wash, get your family ready, dress, make lunches, whatever for your kids, get them to school, then do an 8-hour day, 9 to 5, pick up the kids, go home, then you've got to eat, you've got to get them, do homework. Your whole day really is full.
Yeah, exactly.
To then sacrifice an hour out to cook well, an hour in the morning to cook yourself a good lunch, to cook your family a good meal, to then say, well, I'm going to need an hour at the gym, well, then I'm going to need half an hour to get there, half an hour to get back. Yeah. You've got to find yourself 4 hours in a day. Yeah. And some people don't have that. I know we sit here amongst literal shit food at 3:20 in the morning going, oh, but it's hard for some people. But the reality is it's difficult. And so if you just say, well, eat better.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue.
A lot of fat people understand they're eating bad food. Yeah. They understand that, but they don't have the money or the time to eat well.
Yeah, and it's not
and
just
live well.
It's not just money and time. It's also, I mean, psychology plays a huge part in it. There are people who are addicted to eating food, whatever that means. You know, people feel dependent on that to feel okay. Like there are people who, if they didn't eat cakes every day, they would be a wreck because they have this psychological block built in, and that's probably a very common thing. Like, you know, there are people who, if they didn't have these fatty foods, these sugary foods, these foods filled with addictive substances like caffeine, like Coca-Cola, like it's full of caffeine, you're addicted to it. You know, well, that's easier said than done. Given that
another problem with your fast foods, they're full of substances that have a very quick release of endorphins and happiness, and you become addicted to that feeling. However, you never get enough of that feeling. Yeah.
You always need it.
You can get full, but you desire more. Yeah. So whether it's your caffeines, your refined sugars, your corn syrups, your whatever they are, they're all manufactured produce that makes you dependent to a product whether you understand it or not. In the same way that people can't function without coffee in the morning, or people can't function without cigarettes. Yeah. Or a drink in the evening. It is a dependence. And I'm not a mathematician, but you're a million times more likely to become dependent on ice cream, burgers, than you are on broccoli. Yeah. No one's eating broccoli going, I can't fucking get enough of broccoli. Yeah. I like broccoli, it's delicious. But I'm not picking it out saying I need it. Yeah, I'm not at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on a Saturday going, I'm a bit peckish. What I'll do is I'll go and pick up a broccoli. Yeah. I'll boil it for an hour. Yeah. Steam it, and then I'll pop it in the gob. I'll pop it to Mackey's. I'll go down to Greg's. Exactly.
Like when it comes to fresh vegetables and stuff like that, one of the consumer expectations is that it's been untampered with. Where that expectation doesn't exist with any other food other than fresh foods. Yeah. So you have these fresh foods that haven't been tampered with, and what that means is they don't have any addictive substances in them. Like, I'm just going to get... Hang on a second. Got a chocolate bar here. A double decker,
which, might I point out, is delicious.
Yeah, really nice. But it's probably because it's got glucose syrup, sugar, glucose fructose syrup, vegetable oil, fat-reduced cocoa, dried egg whites, flavourings, salt, milk, chocolate, dried whole milk, cocoa mass, cocoa butter, dried whey, vegetable fat, emulsifier, flavourings, crispy cereal, 5.5%.
Anti-caking agent.
Anti-caking agent, which is calcium carbonate. All sorts of different emulsifiers and flavourings, and loads of E numbers, E471, E442. Like, these are things that you don't find in fresh fruits.
Well, they're man-made products.
Yeah, or at the very least, they're synthesized. You're just going to eat that. Yeah. At the very least, they're synthesized versions of products that are found naturally, or They're extracted.
Because
whatever it is, I mean, if this grew on a tree, it wouldn't have half of this shit
a fucking ton of those trees.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing, because those are invented to increase the length at which they can be sold.
Yeah.
The cheaper they are to make, the more profits they make. It's a money-driven industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of people forget that, because it's food and you consume it and you need to consume it to survive. But people are going to make money off it, and people have been making money off it for centuries.
Yeah.
And will continue to do so. But the advances of society and science and all this kind of stuff, with your patenting of produce, all your Monsanto argument, all that stuff, the advancements that we have mean that the rich can put that on poor people who have no other choice.
Yeah. And I think as well, at some point, it's out of anyone's control. Like, where name the one person in the world who can stop this? Nobody can.
The Rothschilds.
Well, I mean, you say that, but imagine if one of the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or whatever stood up and said, "I think we should stop selling fatty foods." They'd just be fucking shot in the head.
Shot in the head, yeah.
They would be shot in the head.
Yeah.
They would have a bullet in their brain. Like, that's not going to happen.
But it will never happen, because
it can't happen.
You keep your interests.
The only way that we can get rid of fatty foods or whatever is if each individual person decides of their own volition to stop eating fatty foods, and that is not going to happen.
Not going to happen,
because I'm one of those people, and I'm not going to do it because I like fatty foods, and I also just can't be arsed. I've got too much shit going on, in my life. I don't want to.
My life is too busy with 3 a.m. podcasting.
I'm not going to give up.
Think about eating anything other than double deckers, right?
Exactly. I'm not going to give up what I perceive as just minutiae in my life.
Yeah.
Like, it's just very meaningless shit that I don't really care about. I'm not going to work to give that up, and nobody else is either. So this is just something that we're going to be stuck with until it becomes profitable to go the other way.
But the thing is, when does it become paramount to go the other way?
I mean, maybe it never will. And in that case, so what? We'll still be in this situation. This situation isn't that bad. Like, a lot of people are fat, but a lot of people aren't. Like, it's not the end of the world.
2/3 are still fine.
Yeah, 2/3 of us. Brilliant.
Great job.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one, though. It's a worrying statistic when you see that, however many million, billion people are living
really
below the poverty line and are starving to death.
Yeah.
How many adverts do you see on telly saying,
help the Africans.
Little baby, whatever, hasn't got any food.
Yeah.
And he's going to die.
Yeah.
And we're eating so much shite.
We're just shoving Vicky's biscuits into our mouths.
And that is literally what we're doing. We live in a world where there's an abundance of food. If anything, far too much.
I mean, we're in such a strange world. The Earth, as it is now, populated by humans, is strange as fuck. It's so weird. Like, there are so many people, and we're so connected to those people that we see the surface of all of their stories. So you'll see the surface level of the story of this guy who's in fucking Beirut or whatever, but you won't feel it. So you'll feel guilty for not feeling it, and you'll want to feel it, and you'll have all of these weird emotions going on. This is not something that we had to deal with like 200 years ago. 200 years ago, it was like, how's Sandra down the road? Is her fever cleared up? Yeah, it has. All right.
No, she's dead.
Yeah. 3 months later, something else happens.
Yeah.
Like...
Your life is literally within a couple of mile radius.
Exactly, yeah. You never had to worry about social issues, about individuality, about expression, about... nowadays people feel guilty if they're not perceived as living. Like, people have to use the hashtag, like, hashtag living it up. People have to make sure that people know that they're living.
Literally know they're living it up.
It's people are so anxious and worried about what other people think of them. And that's just a symptom of the weird, fucked up universe that we live in. It's only going to get weirder, and it's going to be really interesting to see, but also really scary.
Dangerous.